The late afternoon sky hung heavy with the promise of rain as Evangeline Harper sat on the wooden steps of the general store, her few belongings gathered in a worn carpet bag at her feet. 3 days had passed since her intended husband, Marcus Whitley, had taken one look at her scarred hands and pronounced her unsuitable for a respectable man's wife. The burns she had received trying to save her family's farmhouse from fire 2 years ago had healed. But they had left their mark, twisted skin that made proper ladies avert their eyes and eligible men reconsider their proposals. At 26, Evangeline had already endured more rejection than most women faced in a lifetime. The fire that had claimed her family's home had also claimed her parents and younger brother, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the shame of being unable to save them. She had worked as a seamstress in Kansas City until the factory closed, then answered Marcus's advertisement for a mail order, bride with the desperate hope that distance and loneliness might make a man overlook her imperfections. She had been wrong. Now she sat stranded in the small frontier town of Cedar Creek, Montana, with barely enough money for a week's meals and nowhere to go. The other townsfolk had been polite but distant, their sympathy tempered by the practical understanding that an unmarried woman with no family was a burden their community could ill afford. The sound of approaching wagon wheels made her look up from her contemplation of an uncertain future. A covered wagon drawn by 2 sturdy horses was making its way down the muddy main street, and even from a distance, Evangeline could see that it carried passengers. As it drew closer, she caught sight of the driver, a tall man in a weathered hat whose presence seemed to command attention even in the simple act of guiding his team through the town's rutted streets. The wagon pulled to a stop directly in front of the general store, and Evangeline found herself looking up at a man who appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair that showed threads of premature gray and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered by sun and wind, marked with lines that spoke of both hardship and laughter, and there was something in his bearing that suggested he was accustomed to making difficult decisions and living with their consequences. But it was the soft voices calling from the covered wagon that drew Evangeline's attention away from the driver. 2 little girls peered out from beneath the canvas, their faces bright with curiosity as they took in the unfamiliar town. "Papa, can we get down and stretch our legs?" asked the older girl, who appeared to be about 8 years old with blonde hair plaited in careful braids. In a moment, "Anna," the man replied, his voice carrying the patient tone of a father accustomed to managing energetic children. "Let me get our supplies ordered first." As he climbed down from the wagon, Evangeline noticed the way he moved, with the controlled grace of someone who worked hard for his living but had not been broken by it. When he caught sight of her sitting on the store steps, he touched the brim of his hat in polite acknowledgement. "Ma'am," he said simply, and there was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. Unlike the other men in town, he didn't immediately look away from her scarred hands or make excuses to avoid conversation. Instead, he studied her with the assessing gaze of someone who was used to evaluating livestock and land and people with equal pragmatism. "Good afternoon," Evangeline replied, uncertain why this stranger's attention should make her feel self-conscious in a way that Marcus's rejection had not. The man seemed to consider something for a moment, then made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "My name is Jacob Thorne," he said, removing his hat and revealing hair that was indeed touched with premature silver. "I own a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Are you by any chance the lady who was supposed to marry Marcus Whitley?" Evangeline felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Word travels fast in a small town," she said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. "It does," Jacob agreed matter-of-factly. "And in this case, I'm grateful for it." Before Evangeline could ask what he meant by that, the 2 little girls had climbed down from the wagon and approached with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. The older girl, Anna, had her father's serious gray eyes and a dusting of freckles across her nose. The younger one, who couldn't have been more than 5, had darker hair and the kind of round face that spoke of a gentle, trusting nature. "Papa, who is the pretty lady?" asked the younger girl, staring at Evangeline with frank interest. "This is Miss Harper, Lucy," Jacob said, his voice softening as he spoke to his daughter. She's having some difficulties with her travel arrangements. Anna stepped closer, studying Evangeline with the directness that children often displayed before adults taught them it was impolite. Are you sad about something, Miss Harper? You look like you might cry. The innocent observation hit closer to the truth than Evangeline cared to admit. I'm just tired, sweetheart. Sometimes when grown-ups are tired, they look sad even when they're not. Lucy nodded solemnly, as if this explained everything. Papa looks sad sometimes, too, especially when he thinks we're not watching. Mama's in heaven now, so he has to take care of everything by himself. Jacob's expression tightened slightly at his daughter's matter-of-fact revelation, but he didn't correct her. Instead, he knelt down so he was at eye level with both girls. Anna, Lucy, why don't you go into the store and ask Mr. Peterson if he has any of those peppermint sticks you like so much? Tell him I'll be in to settle our account in a few minutes. The girls scampered off with the enthusiasm of children promised a treat, leaving Jacob and Evangeline alone on the wooden sidewalk. The silence that followed was filled with the ordinary sounds of a small town going about its daily business. Horses nickering, shopkeepers calling to customers, the distant sound of hammering from the blacksmith's shop. My wife died 8 months ago, Jacob said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for Evangeline to hear. Influenza took her in less than a week, along with half the territory it seemed like. Left me with 2 little girls who need more than I know how to give them. Evangeline felt her throat tighten with sympathy. I'm so sorry for your loss. Jacob nodded his acknowledgement, then continued with the straightforward manner of a man who had learned to deal with hard truths. I've been managing as best I can, but a ranch is no place for young girls without a woman's guidance. They need someone who can teach them the things their mother would have taught them. Someone who can give them the kind of care and attention that a man working from dawn to dusk simply can't provide. Evangeline began to understand where this conversation was leading, and her heart started beating faster. I heard about what happened with Marcus, Jacob continued. Heard he turned you away because of some scars on your hands. Evangeline looked down at her hands, which she typically kept hidden beneath gloves or in the folds of her skirt. The twisted skin that marked her palms and fingers was a constant reminder of the night she had tried and failed to save her family. They're not very pleasant to look at, she said quietly. May I see them? The request was so unexpected that Evangeline looked up sharply. I beg your pardon? Your hands, Jacob said patiently. May I see them? Slowly, reluctantly, Evangeline extended her hands, palm up. The scars were indeed extensive, covering most of her palms and several of her fingers with the kind of twisted, discolored skin that spoke of severe burns that had healed without proper medical attention. Jacob took her hands in his own, turning them over gently as he examined the scarring. His touch was clinical but not unkind, the assessment of someone who had seen his share of injuries and understood their implications. These are from fire, he said, and it wasn't a question. Yes, I tried to save my family when our house caught fire. I wasn't successful. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, still holding her hands in his. When he spoke again, his voice was soft with something that might have been respect. You have the hands of someone who fights for the people she loves, he said simply. That's exactly the kind of person I want caring for my daughters. Evangeline felt tears spring to her eyes. Never, in all the months since the fire, had anyone looked at her scars and seen anything other than disfigurement. To have this stranger see them as evidence of love and courage rather than failure was almost more than she could bear. Mr. Thorne, she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. I have a proposition for you, Miss Harper. It's not romantic, and it's not based on any kind of affection or attraction. It's a practical arrangement that could benefit both of us. Evangeline waited, hardly daring to breathe. I need a mother for my girls, Jacob said, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. Someone who can care for them and teach them and love them the way they deserve to be loved. And from what I can see, you need shelter and security and a place where you can belong. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. I'm proposing marriage, Miss Harper. Not for love, not for passion, but for practical reasons that make sense for both of us. You would have a home and a purpose, and my daughters would have the mother they desperately need. Evangeline stared at him in amazement. You're offering to marry me? A woman you've known for less than 10 minutes? I'm offering to marry a woman who has scarred hands because she tried to save her family, Jacob corrected. A woman who answered a stranger's advertisement and traveled hundreds of miles looking for a chance at a new life. A woman who sits on store steps with dignity intact even when that new life has been yanked away from her. He released her hands and stepped back slightly, giving her space to consider his proposal. I'm not offering you romance, Miss Harper. I won't pretend that this would be anything other than a partnership based on mutual need. But I can offer you security, respect, and the chance to be part of a family again. Evangeline looked past him to where Anna and Lucy could be seen through the store window, their faces bright with excitement as they examined the penny candy display. They were beautiful children, and they moved with the easy confidence of girls who had been loved and cherished despite their recent loss. What would you expect from me? She asked quietly. Care for my daughters as if they were your own, Jacob replied immediately. Teach them the things they need to know to become good women. Help manage the household and make our house feel like a home again. And what would I receive in return? My name, my protection, and a place in our family for as long as you want it. A comfortable home, financial security, and the knowledge that you're valued and needed. Evangeline closed her eyes and thought about her alternatives. She could use her remaining money to buy passage back east, where she might be able to find work as a seamstress or governess if she was lucky. She could stay in Cedar Creek and hope that someone would eventually offer her employment, though the chances seemed slim in a town this small. Or she could accept this stranger's practical proposal and step into a life that might not include romance, but would provide purpose and belonging. When she opened her eyes, she found Jacob watching her with patient attention, clearly prepared to accept whatever decision she made. Your daughters, she said slowly. How do you think they would feel about suddenly having a stepmother? They've been asking for a new mama since about a week after their mother died, Jacob said with a slight smile. They don't really understand that it's not something you can just order from the catalog like a new dress. As if summoned by their conversation, Anna and Lucy emerged from the store, each clutching a striped peppermint stick. They approached with the slightly sticky enthusiasm of children who had been given unexpected treats. Papa, Mr. Peterson says the supplies you ordered will be ready in the morning, Anna reported dutifully. And he gave us extra candy because we were so polite, Lucy added, her words slightly muffled by the peppermint stick. Jacob nodded his approval, then seemed to make another of his characteristic quick decisions. Girls, how would you feel if Miss Harper came to live with us on the ranch? Both children turned to stare at Evangeline with expressions of delighted surprise. Forever? Anna asked, her gray eyes wide with hope. If she agrees to marry me and become your new mama, then yes, forever. Lucy immediately launched herself at Evangeline, wrapping her small arms around her waist with the wholehearted enthusiasm of a child who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Will you be our mama? She asked, looking up at Evangeline with complete trust. We promise we'll be good, and we already know how to help with lots of things. Anna was more reserved, but Evangeline could see the longing in her eyes that she was trying to hide behind 8-year-old dignity. We don't get into too much trouble, Anna said seriously, and we miss having a mama very much. Looking down at these two little girls who were willing to accept her so completely, Evangeline felt something shift in her chest. For months, she had been thinking of herself as damaged goods, a woman whose scars made her unfit for normal life. But these children didn't see her scars. They saw a potential mother, someone who might fill the enormous hole that their real mother's death had left in their lives. Yes, she said softly, then louder. Yes, I would be honored to be your mama. The cheer that went up from Lucy was loud enough to attract attention from other people on the street, while Anna's smile was radiant enough to light up the gathering. Dusk. Jacob stepped forward and extended his hand to Evangeline in the same straightforward manner he had used throughout their entire conversation. Then, we have an agreement, he said simply. As Evangeline shook his hand, she realized that she was agreeing to much more than a practical arrangement. She was stepping into a new life, a new identity, and a new understanding of what it meant to be needed and valued. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church at the edge of town, witnessed by the minister, the store owner who served as justice of the peace, and a handful of curious townspeople who had heard about the unusual courtship. Evangeline wore her best dress, a blue wool that had seen better days but was clean and respectable, while Jacob wore a suit that was clearly reserved for special occasions. Anna and Lucy stood beside them throughout the brief ceremony, their faces glowing with an excitement that was contagious. When the minister pronounced Jacob and Evangeline husband and wife, the girls cheered as if they had just witnessed the most romantic event in the history of the world. The kiss that sealed their union was brief and respectful, more of a handshake between lips than an expression of passion. But there was something in Jacob's eyes as he looked at his new wife that suggested the potential for deeper feelings, given time and the right circumstances. The journey to the Thorn Ranch took them through some of the most beautiful country Evangeline had ever seen. Rolling hills covered in late summer grass stretched as far as the eye could see, broken by stands of cottonwood trees that followed the meandering path of a clear-running creek. The ranch house, when it came into view, was larger and more substantial than Evangeline had expected. A 2-story structure built of local stone and timber that spoke of prosperity and permanence. "It's beautiful," Evangeline said softly, and Jacob's face brightened with unmistakable pride. "My father started this place with nothing but determination and a good eye for land," he said. "I've been working to build it into something that will provide for my family for generations." The word family now included her, Evangeline realized with a start. After months of feeling like she belonged nowhere and to no one, she was suddenly part of something larger than herself. The interior of the house revealed the touch of a woman who had clearly taken pride in creating a warm and welcoming home. The furniture was sturdy and comfortable, the walls were painted in cheerful colors, and there were small details everywhere that spoke of care and attention. Embroidered cushions, carefully tended plants, photographs and mementos that told the story of a family's life together. "Mama made most of the pretty things," Anna explained as she gave Evangeline a tour of the house. "Papa keeps everything exactly the way she left it because he says it helps us remember her." Evangeline felt a pang of something that might have been inadequacy. How could she possibly step into a home where another woman's presence was still so strongly felt? How could she become a mother to children who had clearly adored their real mother? But Lucy solved the problem with the straightforward logic of childhood. "We can add new pretty things, too," she announced, taking Evangeline's scarred hand in her small one without any sign of discomfort. "Mama would like that. She always said a house should grow and change as the family grows and changes." That first evening, as they sat around the dinner table sharing a meal that Evangeline had helped prepare, she began to understand what she had truly gained through this practical marriage. It wasn't just security or a roof over her head. It was purpose, belonging, and the opportunity to love and be loved in return. Jacob proved to be a considerate husband and a devoted father, patient with his daughter's endless questions and generous with his praise for Evangeline's efforts to fit into their established routines. He was also, she discovered, a man of unexpected depth, with a dry sense of humor that emerged once he began to relax around her. The children responded to her presence with gratitude that was almost overwhelming. They seemed to have been starving for feminine attention and guidance, and they absorbed everything she taught them with eager enthusiasm. Anna wanted to learn to sew and cook and manage a household. Lucy was interested in everything from gardening to animal, cared to the stories Evangeline told while they worked together, but it was the gradual development of her relationship with Jacob that surprised Evangeline most. What had begun as a practical arrangement slowly evolved into something that felt remarkably like partnership. He valued her opinions about ranch management and household decisions. He listened when she suggested improvements or voiced concerns. Most importantly, he treated her with the kind of respect that she had never experienced in her previous relationships. 6 months after their wedding, as they sat on the front porch watching Anna and Lucy play with a litter of puppies that had been born in the barn, Jacob turned to Evangeline with an expression she couldn't quite read. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Evangeline felt her heart skip. Had he decided that their arrangement wasn't working? Had he realized that he wanted more than she could give him? What is it? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I think I'm falling in love with my wife, Jacob said simply. The words hung in the evening air between them, more precious than any romantic declaration because they were so clearly heartfelt and honest. Evangeline felt tears spring to her eyes. Are you sure? Because I need to tell you something too. Jacob raised an eyebrow, waiting. I think I'm falling in love with my husband, Evangeline said softly. The smile that spread across Jacob's face was like sunshine after the longest winter. He reached for her hand, her scarred, damaged hand, and brought it to his lips to press a gentle kiss against her palm. Well then, he said, his voice warm with affection and promise. I guess we'll have to figure out what to do about that. As they sat together watching their daughters play in the fading light, Evangeline reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west looking for security and found love instead. She had accepted a practical proposal and discovered a passion that was deeper and more lasting than anything she had ever imagined. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with romance and attraction, but with mutual need and the courage to trust that two damaged people might be able to heal each other. Her scars would always be part of her, but they were no longer marks of shame. They were evidence of her willingness to fight for the people she loved. And they had led her to a man who understood that true beauty comes not from perfection, but from the strength to survive and the grace to love again. 5 years later, as Evangeline stood in the kitchen of their expanded home, watching Jacob teach their 3 children, Anna, Lucy, and baby Samuel, how to care for a newborn calf, she marveled at how completely her life had been transformed. The practical marriage that had begun with mutual need had evolved into a love story that was all the more precious for having been built on solid ground, rather than fleeting passion. Jacob had taught her that she was worthy of love exactly as she was, scars and all, and she had given him and his daughters the gift of a family made whole through choice rather than chance. If this story of practical love becoming profound connection touched your heart and reminded you that sometimes the most lasting relationships are built on mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than immediate attraction, please share it with someone who believes in the power of chosen family. Your support helps us continue creating stories that celebrate the beautiful truth that love comes in many forms, and that sometimes what begins as convenience can transform into the deepest kind of devotion. Subscribe for more tales that remind us all that our scars tell stories of survival, and that the right person will see our damage as evidence of our strength. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.